Ao passar pelo ribeiro, onde às vezes me debruço.
Good afternoon and welcome to FACyL Festival 2020. It is my pleasure to introduce everyone to theatre director Thomas Ostermeier and playwright Maja Zade. They have been collaborating together during many, many years. It's an honor to have them speak out loud some of the questions that make them do what they do, theatre, to ask themselves what kind of situations, what kind of characters or constellations are interesting to be shown in theatre, which is their media. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm trying to put up a conversation here. It's a pretty awkward and challenging to talk to Maja, because I have the feeling, first of all, Maja doesn't like to talk about her writing so much. Second, the nice thing about our collaboration is that I have the feeling Maja, as she is working with me for years and years, kind of suggests what she suggests without having loads of conversations, because she followed my work and she knows instinctively what's happening. But I'm trying here to maybe raise the first question, which is about her play Abgrund, Abyss, which I directed, is it already nearly 2 years ago? Yeah. Nearly 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago.
Yeah, 1.5.
So my first question would be, and then you can also, of course, ask me as many questions as you like. First question would be, how did it all happen? Like, how did you start writing this play? What made you write this play? What was the first idea? What was the first line? What was the first basic approach, or wasn't there any thoughts before and you just sat down and had to write what you wrote?
I think in a way that is exactly what happened, that I sat down and started to write. I didn't even initially know that I was writing a play or was planning to write a play. I'd never really thought about writing a play, but I was just I'd been to a series of dinners at friends' houses or dinners I'd made, and I realized all the conversations were quite similar. And I also realized what a sort of weird conversation was going on about how you talk about really serious things and then in the same breath you talk about really trivial things, and there seems to be no weight as to what's important really and what's not. And then often I came home and I thought, I said such incredibly stupid things and I'm sort of disgusted with myself. So I had all those voices in my head and I just started to write them down. And then I think after I had maybe 15, 20 pages, I suddenly thought, I'm actually writing a play. And then I started to think about, before it was just voices, then I started to think about the characters and the setting, and sort of tried to structure the whole thing, and in a way thought about a plot. I knew that because I sort of felt disgusted with myself and with my friends, that something had to happen that would shake the characters out of how they talked.
So
that's kind of how it started.
So maybe we have to explain to the audience members that after a series of scenes where we follow like casual dinner meeting conversations, you kind of introduced a new storyline, which is around two children which are sleeping in the bedroom besides the kitchen where it all happens, this dinner invitation. And at a certain point, it seems that one of the children has been killed by the other child by throwing this very child out of the window. So at what point of your writing this idea came? Like pretty early, or was it a later moment in your writing?
I think after I had written maybe the first 20 pages, I knew that something had to happen, that kind of metaphorically I wanted to throw a bomb onto those people. And I've, for some reason, always been fascinated by, sounds morbid, but children killing other children, the sort of, you know, sister, brother, or brother-sister dynamic, which I think is really fraught and has a lot of aggression. And often, I think, with the older one, once the younger one is born, they actually feel the impulse to murder them. And sometimes it does happen. But then what I didn't immediately, I think, decide was that because, as you know, the first half of the play is the sort of dinner party where everything is normal, and then it divides, and there's one version of the play that goes on where nothing has happened, and one version where something does happen. So because I was interested in how people talk and sort of how that changes, and to put them next to each other to kind of really make the contrast clear, I guess.
Does it make you feel depressed that no critical journalist in any of the reviews understood what you've been trying here with these two divided stories?
No, it doesn't depress me, because I think you could also read it that one is like the horror vision that kind of flickers into the play. So in a way, I think it doesn't matter. I think you realize that there's this weird blurring of reality where it sort of jumps. I think people understood that, or I don't know how you felt.
No, but I think the beauty of the dramaturgy is that you, at a certain point, divide two storylines, and that you, of course, because you have the storyline of horror, look at the storyline where nothing horrible happened in a different way. And I think it's fundamental that you understand this, because it's also quite advanced dramaturgy, because I don't know so far any play which tells two different stories for half of the play, you know, and so I feel depressed that nobody understood it, and I feel guilty that I didn't put it out in my mise en scène, in my directing, even though all of the scenes which follow one storyline are without this tissue, without this curtain of textile, and the other storyline is with this textile. And I thought this is a clear enough sign, but nobody understood this.
Yeah. But I mean, in a way, yes, I know what you mean, but I don't think it matters, because I think people still get the idea of the fragility of the situation, and that there's this horror that could happen in our lives at any moment. And of course, you know, I could have made the whole thing a lot more clear, but I sort of wanted it to be complicated and irritating.
Yeah, that's what I thought is the beauty of the play, because if it was only the horror story, it could also feel a bit banal. But as you suggest, like two different ways of how the evening does happen or may happen, that is so intelligent, because then you have a completely new perspective on a normal dinner invitation. and you understand how banal this all might seem in confrontation with horror, or in confrontation with death, or in confrontation with all these superficial conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, yeah.
No, go on.
I mean, that's really also for me and myself and me as a director, the point why the play is interesting for me, because it's a kind of a laboratory in that moment, a laboratory of social behavior, where when you put them in this situation, they behave like this. When you put them in another situation, they behave in a different way. And that's what's interesting for me as a director, that all our behavior can be, or most of our behavior can be reduced to, I'm trying to adapt to the circumstances. I'm trying to adapt on different circumstances. So when the circumstances are this, I behave like this. In other circumstances, I behave in another way. And this is, for me, my kind of methodology, that all our actions are driven by us as human beings trying to adapt to circumstances. Our behavior is not because I am this character is evil, this character is good, this character is narcissistic, that's why he behaved like this. That's a very banal view on the world, in my idea.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I also thought it was very interesting because, you know, we met with some of your directing students to talk about the play, and a lot of the conversations were that they were trying to describe what the characters were like, or saying like, these are really, to put it simply, nasty people. And I think we both agreed that, well, they're not. They're just like us. It's just that something happens in that moment. That's why I always find it difficult when actors go, well, my character is like this, my character wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
I think, well, under certain circumstances, you would, you know.
Yeah. Was it actually the very first play that you wrote?
Yeah.
And now you're writing like
Crazy.
crazy since this very first play. How come? How do you feel yourself with being so productive? I mean, of course, first of all, it's wonderful, it's beautiful that you're so creative. But from out of the blue, out of accident, you all of a sudden became a playwright.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I wrote Abgrund, or I'd just finished Abgrund, to some extent, I thought, well, maybe this is just like a fluke, you know. And then I wrote the second play, Status Quo, which actually the Schaubühne opened before Abgrund, fairly quickly afterwards, just in a really banal way, just because I wanted to see, if I could do it again, if I really could write plays, and also, of course, because I had something I wanted to talk about. And I think, you know, you either write, I mean, I think what I discovered when I wrote Status Quo is that, you know, because, as you know, we've spent so much time in theatre, I've spent so much time in rehearsal rooms, I've done adaptation, I've translated a lot of plays. I sort of know the craft without actually having written much before. So I find that actually quite easy.
Mm.
So that's not something I think I had to learn, because it's what I think about every day. So I think you either sort of write a lot because you have some story to tell, you know, you sort of feel this inner need to talk about this, or, as you know, we've just done, or we're working on 2 pieces where someone else gives you a push and says, write something about this, which is a completely different starting point. And
did you already experience this fear of the white sheet?
Not of the white sheet, but I can see the fear of that maybe. I mean, I think you can always find something to write about, but for me, it's not about, it needs to be something I'm interested in. It's not just about producing something. I think there is this fear that you need to find the subject, that maybe you can't find a new subject.
I have the feeling when I look at your writing at the moment, I have the feeling like as if you were for years and years building a reservoir of dialogues, characters, stories, dramaturgy, and it never had. It's like a boiling pot, and now somebody took away. Lifted the pot and it all comes out, and it seems like an endless content of stories and lines and dialogues and characters in this pot.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think it is true that like in a weird way, I know I can do it. I'm quite confident.
Yeah, that's how I feel about your writing.
It's sort of fun, and a lot of it is, like the play that we're talking about right now, the new one I'm just writing. A lot of it is just about craft as well, and it's about psychology. And I sort of feel now that I probably wouldn't have been able to, like in my 20s. I kind of know about people.
Yeah.
I sort of have a fair amount of experience.
How do you know about people?
Well, I think, I mean, you can talk about that, but I think we're both very good at, it sounds a bit perverse, at watching people and listening to what they say, just observing.
Would you consider yourself as an outsider who is more observing than participating?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I always sit in conversations and notice what people are saying and how they're saying it. I really love the way people sort of reveal what they're really thinking by the way they say things without realizing it themselves. So I'm sort of analyzing that.
Do you suffer under this perspective sometimes? Like I do, because sometimes when I'm in a fight with my partner, I find myself in observing myself how I'm trying to be the more convincing in the argument.
Yeah, I'm not quite that bad, but I think what I do more is that I sort of replay conversations that have happened and think of various versions that conversation could have gone if someone had said.
You do this in your daily life, or you do this writing a dialogue?
No, in my daily life, like I've always had imaginary conversations or... So, but I think everyone does that, don't they? Don't you do that?
No, usually I don't. Well, sometimes I do, like when I feel bad because like 10 minutes later I have the best punchline to answer to a stupid sentence which has been said. But I'm only imagining this very punchline as an answer to the sentence before, but I never be able to reconstruct whole dialogues. And that brings me to another point that I have the feeling, like all great writers maybe, you must have an incredible memory. Like that is, for me, the basic quality of your writing, which is, yeah, when I read your dialogues, I think, yes, this is how people talk. And this is something which usually very rarely happens. And as you know, that I'm fascinated on how people in real life behave. That is kind of, for me, the most important thing about dialogues, that I have the feeling that that's the sound of reality.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of why our interests meet, because we're both really interested in that. Yeah, and I also, I mean, it's not, I'm making it sound like more analytical than it actually is, but I think it's a problem with new German plays that people don't talk like that. I mean, of course, a lot of German plays don't even have characters, or a kind of very theoretical or whatever, but you know, in Britain there are a lot of writers, I think, that are quite good at that kind of dialogue that's true to life, and I think in Germany that's not the case. So that's sort of something I want to do. And also, I think, you know, you've sort of worked on that project of finding that kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, sort of hyper-realism or heightened naturalism over many years, and sort of trying to achieve actors not speaking like they're in the theatre, but to make it completely true to life. And in a sense, that's also what I'm trying to do with the dialogue.
But it's not only your dialogues, it's also, like when I think of the project we're working, or you're working on at the moment, I mean, I think we can tell the audience what it is. It's a version of Oedipus. And you start the play with her preparing breakfast and smoothies, and Oedipus is coming back from jogging. So not only the dialogue is so true to life, but also it's a very, very casual situation. Somebody at home preparing, like in a villa, in a holiday resort or retreat, and this is how the day starts. Yeah, true. But that's also for me again the beauty of your writing, that I can immediately adapt to what's in the scene, because I know the situation so well, and that out of this situation, which is so daily life, you have the ability to, without a few sentences, tell us what might be a conflict between the characters, and then unfold this conflict in a very subtle way.
Yeah, I think with Oedipus, I did have a moment of thinking, well, how do you get into the play? And actually, I think to some extent I got the idea from one of the shows you've done, or you've done it in several shows, but I remember particularly one production that we actually both worked on, Der Name, in Salzburg, a Jon Fosse play, and the opening is just someone clearing up the room. And I think I sort of loved that. I wanted sort of some kind of focus on Jocasta. And I think there's nothing greater than seeing someone just do something in a room and nothing happening. You know, you get to know something about that character without dialogue. It's like you're zooming in on that person. And there's also, I don't know, there can be something very touching about someone alone on stage, just doing something really normal and everyday.
Definitely. But that is a very individual pleasure which we both share. I mean, I don't know any theater maker of our generation who would say, oh, it's lovely to watch a character. I mean, I started Miss Julie, my production in Moscow, which was rewritten by Mikhail Donyenkov, and the evening starts with her preparing chicken soup for, I don't know, 10 minutes or 8 minutes, nothing happening. And I love this so much. But it's very rare, very seldom, no, that theater makers still do have a passion for just simple actions on stage.
Yeah, I guess so, but also, at least in Germany, there's not that many theatre makers that have a passion for dialogue and characters.
Yeah.
Sometimes seems, you know, so I think we're a little bit either old-fashioned or already avant-garde again in that sense.
We're something between. How come? Do you have any theory on this?
Why that is the case in Germany?
Yeah, or probably in a lot of countries around the world, that theater took a bizarre way, no?
I don't know. I mean, I always thought that it is something to do with the traditions out of which theatre comes in the different countries. You know, in Britain, it's sort of, it comes from entertainment and, you know, Shakespeare appealing to a really broad variety of people. And in Germany, you know, you had Schiller, Lessing, etc., already stating that it was meant to be something for edification and education. And I think that to some extent, or through many twists and turns, has led to these very intellectual, theoretical texts that are really popular in Germany.
Do you have the feeling that we are now seeing a shift here, that the theater is shifting again towards dialogue, situation, and character? Or
well, I think the weird way, in a way, you know, those plays with dialogue and characters do happen in Germany, but quite often they just get imported from America or Britain. So in a way, those plays are being put on. I think there will be a shift, but I sometimes think there's a huge disconnect between what audiences actually want to see and what theatre critics or theatre studies people want to see. So my sense is actually that a lot of the audience does want to see characters and stories. At least that's the impression we have at our theatre.
Probably one of the reasons for our success, that we are still interested in characters.
Yeah, and I think it's also one of the reasons that a lot of our shows tour abroad.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, because I think you meet through the cultures, through characters and stories that you can share and compare.
Do you have the feeling that we need to push a little bit in order to not be forgotten with this old school or future avant-garde way of making theater? Like promote certain playwrights, promote certain directors, promote a certain way of making theater?
Yes, but I think we're kind of doing that already.
Okay.
You know, with, for example, this season we have people like Simon McBurney and Simon Stone working here, you know, who have completely different aesthetics and completely different styles, but they're completely interested in stories and characters, you know. So I think even within that, it can be so different as well. But I also thought it was interesting, again, your students at the Ansbush Theatre School, where I did this little thing where I read new plays with them, this time a different class than the one I was talking about before. And I had a really wide range of plays, you know, more traditional plays with characters, etc., more post-dramatic plays, no characters, etc. And I kind of expected them to go completely for the abstract thing, but that wasn't the case at all.
Oh, yeah?
They thought all this was really, you know, not well-built, conventional, but sort of well-written plays with situations and characters that maybe also played with form. They found so much more interesting. And maybe there is a shift, you know.
Can you give one or two examples of the plays they were fancying?
Well, I mean, of course, they all had different opinions, but for example, I think they liked Dance Nation by Claire Barron, and they liked Alice Birch, Trilogy of a Suicide, you know, which are quite sophisticated plays, but they have characters and stories, you know. I'm not going to name the ones that they didn't like.
But it was contemporary writing.
Yes, they were all plays written within the last 5 years, and yeah, all plays written by women.
That's good. That's a good thing. I mean, maybe
it's coincidence, but maybe it also does mean that something is changing again. Who knows?
Oh, I'm 100% sure that we are witnessing a big shift since 5, 6, 7 years. I understood this when I was talking to Gerhard Jörder, who was a critic in Germany and is now teaching, writing theater reviews. And he's going, of course, he's going to theater shows all around Germany with his students. And he told me that a lot of his students connected with our version of Enemy of the People, and that for them it was an example of the way of theater they want to do, because you could follow the story and it still was relevant in a political way. And it was breaking up the fourth wall, so it wasn't stupid chamber play. And that was for them their example of how they want to do theater or review theater or see theater. And I also can tell you my experiences with my students, that all of a sudden for some 6, 7 years, they are fascinated and passionate about what is the psychological situation of the character in this very moment? How does this affect the acting? How can you break down the dramaturgy of a scene? How can you find the conflict and the drama? And how does the conflict of a situation make the characters act in the sense of taking up action? And that was something which I've been teaching for 20 years. But the first 15 years of my teaching, nobody was interested in this. And all of a sudden, they are fascinated with it and passionate about this, and they really want to learn how you can put that as an acting method and as a directing method. So I do believe that this this generation has a completely new vision of theater. One last thing I wanted to talk about, if you don't have a question. One last thing was talking politics. So if we talk about your first play, Abgrund, Abyss, I think it is a very political view on things, maybe without you wanting it to be political. But the way these very urban and bourgeois people do interact, and then have opinions on political issues, like daily or very relevant political issues. It's only part of a dinner conversation. There's nothing more than I have an opinion, you have an opinion. Okay, I agree, or I don't agree. But it all stays in the conversation. It's never about taking up action or changing the world. It's more about, is my opinion more valuable than yours? So how is your relation to being a political writer, wanting to be a political writer, or not at all caring about this?
I don't. I mean, you're a lot more political in what you put on stage, and I think your aims. I'm not that political. I think, like, the politics. I mean, I'm more interested in that it has a relevance in terms of society, which of course can then be political. Like, you know, my play Status Quo, of course, is a feminist play, so there it's very clear. But with Abgrund, it's more self-criticism of our particular milieu. I don't know. And of course the politics of that milieu, that's true. But I don't think of myself as a political writer, because I'm not that politically minded in that sense, I think.
One more question. I have the feeling that for me, the biggest problem in history of theater and filmmaking and like the mountain which you will never climb and never be as important as he was, is Fassbinder. And for you, it's probably Sarah Kane, isn't it?
No.
Who would it be? Because let me tell you why I had this feeling. Because you said when you were talking about Abyss, you said you wanted to blow it up. You wanted to throw a bomb, and that's exactly what she did in Blasted. Yes,
that is true, and I think Blasted is a great play. And I think Sarah Kane, of course, is really important and amazing, but I think that's so different from what I do that I've also never, I mean, Blasted is my favorite play. Apart from that, I don't have a great connection to Sarah Kane. I have more of a connection to writers like Marius van Meinburg or like Lars Norén, I think. And also Carol Churchill, maybe, you know. But I think they're all sort of very different as well. But I think they're probably like the playwrights that the living playwrights that I admire most, maybe.
You studied literature. Does it have any influence at all on your life as a writer?
No, because I didn't do any contemporary writing in my degrees, and we also, apart from Shakespeare and Restoration comedies, didn't do any drama at all. So, but who would, if we have time, who would you say were the writers that you think are most interesting?
in the recent years. Well, one thing, and that is maybe also an answer to the question the festival was raising when they were asking how does writing has to be today? My answer would always be it has to be completely different to the writing which was there before. So there was a moment in my life when Werner Schwab appeared. I was crazy about him. Then there was a moment, Reinhard Götz was very important for me because it was different how he portrayed the world. And then it was a shock when I read for the first time Sarah Kane, because it was again completely different. And of course, when then all of a sudden Jon Fosse appeared on the screen, I said, oh, wow, this, I don't know any playwright who would have written in the same way like Jon Fosse. But that is also true for Franz Xaver Krötz. That is also true for Marie-Louise Fleisser and other people like Thomas Bernhard, for example. But they are all individually very different from each other. And that is, for me, probably the point where I would go saying, if you ask me how to write a play, which I would direct, then you would have to write a play which I could have never imagined before. That's
easy.
Huh?
Well, that's easy.
Yeah,
I would do that.
It has to be unique, but that's also quite banal when you look at the history of art. You have to take the next step, the next level. You have to progress in your art, and yeah, but it's very difficult. Okay, let's take it till here. Should we stop here because it's 7 o'clock already? Maybe somebody from the festival could join us and tell us that we were shit, but we were anyway. Stop the session here. Nobody's joining us. Nobody is present anymore. They all left. They did not.
The answer then.
Nobody attended the conversation.
Onde às vezes